All you Ethicuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. If you think fixing our workplaces can fix our world, I got a real treat for you today. We are diving deep on the benchmark report, round 2. There were so many questions that we got in our first session. We have aggregated those questions that came through the chat, that have come through DMs, that came through the Ask a Question console that we weren't able to cover when we were on with Ellen Hunt. And we're going to be diving into those today. So as we get started and run through some announcements, drop that LinkedIn URL in the chat. Your network is your net worth. Neither are big enough. I keep hearing about people taking advantage of this network that we're building on the Ethicsverse and help them to expand their impact and prevent themselves from reinventing the wheel. So if you're here for CEUs with SHRM, CCB, or HRCI, this is the place to be. And if you missed our episode on Tuesday, I really encourage you to go back at least to exit on our YouTube channel, Official Ethico. We had the one and only Reed Blackman on his book launch day. Round of applause for this amazing new book. We had a really cool field guide and had a great conversation with Reed. AI is moving a lot faster than we can keep up with. The policies that we end up getting finally approved no longer apply to agentic AI and the new use cases that are happening throughout our organization. So his new book, The Ethical Nightmare Challenge, addresses all of that and gives you a really flexible, applicable framework that you can start reducing risk right away. I'm all by my lonesome today, so keep those emojis coming because that really does sustain me. I want to tell you, you know that we're talking about the benchmark report. If you have not downloaded it, there should be a link on the console for you right now to go ahead and download that. You can follow along on your second screen. And also want to share this really cool, exciting thing. So, before I share the really exciting thing, we got a lot going on in the next couple of weeks. So if you're at HCCA, definitely come by our booth. We've got a fully upgraded booth, massive booth in the middle. We're going to have fun games, giveaways, books, all that kind of stuff. So definitely swing by that. We have the coolest party at HCCA, not my words, on Monday night. So all are welcome. And then if you're at Compliance Week the following week in DC, you definitely should come to the Women's Brunch, which we are sponsoring. We're going to be talking about mentorship. And I got a nice giveaway for everybody who attends. If you are interested in the third-party risk management beta, getting a lot of great feedback from it, hit this QR code, fill out the form. Please do fill out that form so that we can stay organized and follow up with you. This thing is really going to help you collapse down the time that it takes to onboard and monitor your third parties, where a ton of risk resides and a ton of manual work ends up kind of holding up the process. So if you're interested in checking that out, this is a fully AI-driven, fully customizable for your use case and for your organization. I think you're going to absolutely love it. I also think you're absolutely going to love Policy Plus. We are, don't tell anybody, but we're launching this on, tell everybody, but I'm just saying I'm sharing this a little bit early here. We are launching this on Sunday. This thing is awesome as well. This is the first AI native policy management platform. So if you are not getting the benefits out of your current SharePoint, out of policy tech, or whatever you might be using, it's worth giving this a look. You can draft policies in real time. You can use your HRIS system to drive all of your distribution. And one thing that has been getting a lot of feedback from those folks that are in the alpha stage of this that have seen it is the ability to prove comprehension. So many times people just sort of scroll to the bottom of the policy, they click, yes, I acknowledge. And instead, you can go ahead and put little quizzes at the end. And you can track all that.
Creating one compliance policy takes over 40 hours. Manual research, manual drafting, and manual formatting for every single policy. What if AI could do it in minutes? Introducing Policy Plus from Ethico. Watch what happens when a compliance officer types a single prompt. Generate a HIPAA-compliant patient data privacy policy for a 500-bed hospital system. One click, and Policy Plus's AI goes to work. Section by section, the policy builds itself. HIPAA, high-tech, and state-specific requirements all mapped automatically. In under 60 seconds, a complete, structured, regulation-mapped policy is ready for review. Then, your compliance team refines it. Edit with AI suggestions, track every change with full attribution on every edit. With an 80% reduction in policy creation time, what used to take 40 hours now takes under 8. Regulation mapped from day one, this is what AI native policy management looks like. See Policy Plus live. Book a demo at ethico.com/demo.
And wait till the reviews start rolling in. One of the best parts about this new policy platform, it's not the AI stuff, it's the ease with which you can switch over. So we can upload all of your policies, AI tag those things, you can give them a quick review. So if it took you not last time 6 to 9 months to try to get into your current policy platform, this is going to be lickety split. So if you're interested in checking that out, go to the Ethico website or go ahead and put a 1 in the chat and someone will reach out to you. Our good friend over at Integrity Bridge, the one and only Andrew McBride, has a great one. He's got another survey coming out. So hit this QR code, and this is about he's doing a survey on compliance tech implementations. Okay, so if you are responsible for buying and implementing compliance tech at your company, share your experience with Andrew McBride. This is how our community gets better, right? We share our experiences with each other so that we're not left in the in the dark, reinventing wheels and so forth. So I'll leave this QR code up here for a quick sec, and maybe we can drop something in the chat. But we got a lot to cover today, so I'm going to dive in. If you think I'm talking too fast, wait for the replay and you can slow it down on YouTube. So today we're going to be talking about moving from insights to execution. We went through a lot of numbers on the last episode, diving into the benchmark report. We had the one and only Ellen Hunt, one of my all-time faves, coming in and sharing a lot of tactics. You guys asked a bunch of questions and we're going to be diving into those right now. So what do we do next? We got all of this data. We have all of this information. What are we going to do next? So this session is really going to help us answer some of these harder questions. So we're going to be looking at things through a diagnostic lens. We're going to be going through your unanswered questions. Of course, all you Ethicuties, all of you Ethicsverse members are going to get a copy of these slides along with a couple of infographic takeaways. We're starting to generate more of this content that boils down the takeaways from the session. If you did not get the one from the Tuesday session with Reed Blackman, please let us know or hit me up on LinkedIn and I will send that over to you. So we're going to talk about the diagnostic lens. We're going to cover the unanswered questions, and we're going to develop a board level path. So we do a lot of this work and, kind of behind the scenes. It's critical not only that we have the right insights to guide our actions, but it's critical that we are presenting and framing our activities and our impacts to the board so that people have the right perspective on the work that we're doing. So let's boil down the 2025 benchmark report into 4 numbers. We have 12%, 32%, about 47%, and 14.3%. So 12% of reporters withheld any identifying information. This was a massive increase, almost a 7-fold increase from what we've seen in the past. So this is indicating that there's a lot more self-preservation. There's a lot more worry and concern going on inside of our organizations. Our anonymous reporting rate is at about 1/3. Okay, so about 2/3 folks are identifying themselves during the reporting process, but saying, "Hey, keep my identity anonymous," with respect to the company. We also saw 47% for the first time ever. Hotline fell below 50%. So this is always likely going to be a significant channel, but this speaks to the fact that we must be agnostic about which channels we're getting our risk intelligence from and how we construct those channels, whether it's somebody coming through knocking on your door, using the hotline, filling out a form, talking to a manager. We need to equip all of those channels to remove the friction because there's a lot more diversity. This is not 1997 where all the reports are coming through the hotline anymore. Also, we saw a significant increase in privacy and compliance, InfoSec, those kinds of things. Those accounted for 14.3% and 25% in total when you zoom out and you look at all the compliance type cases. So what is that telling us? It's telling us that people are worried, but they're reporting more. Our reporting rate per 100 employees got up to almost 4 per 100, which is great. But there's orders of magnitude, like we talk about, there's orders of magnitude more risk intelligence inside of our organization. So how today's session is structured is we're going to answer those questions from the chat from the first session. And then we're going to dive into reporter discovery, reporter types, and vendor blind spots. We're going to talk about issue follow-ups, and then finally our board level reframe. Throughout, we're going to be sprinkling in some of those other questions that have been asked. So let's dive in and get going here. Okay, so you asked, we're answering this section. We're going to be diving through some of those questions. So one of the first questions we got is, what happens when leadership prioritizes speed over substance and the investigation process becomes a check the box exercise? Well, what I think, there's a core reframe that we want to apply to this. this is a governance problem before it's a compliance problem. This is a framing problem at the leadership level where they don't view this as a valuable exercise. This is something that has to, they're zeroing in on a velocity metric when we need to kind of balance velocity against quality, right? We want a high substantiation rate. We want a high reporting rate. We want to make sure that there is investigative equity throughout our, entire operation. And we want to close cases as fast as possible, but no faster. So I think when you can start to capture the outcome, when you can start to frame out the impact, when you can build documentation processes that can give some better insights into the pressures that people are feeling, not just this outcome, not just this single metric that somebody in leadership who doesn't have the context of your operation has, they can start to kind of take their glasses off, clean off those lenses, and see your operation through a bit of a better lens. It's on you, though. We say this all the time on the Ethicsverse. It's on you to reframe your role inside your organization. If a light bulb is flickering at the top or it's not even on, it's on you to reach up there and screw that light bulb on so that leadership can view your function for the potential strategic lever that it is. So our game is not just processes and documentation and policies and things like that. Our game is really one of influence. We want to influence behavior within the organization, of course, but we also want to influence the perception that those in the middle management and upper management have of our function, because when we can get those endorsements, we can do our job a lot faster. So your process should make inappropriate speed visible, for sure. And you and your leadership need to have the right view of that, okay? So let's kind of move a little bit beyond case closure time to these real measures of quality. It's easy, everybody just wants a simple handle for things. They want to grab onto, okay, well, how fast are our cases closing? Of course, we want to close them as fast as possible, but no faster. But we want to optimize speed in the context of maintaining a high level of quality and a high level of investigative equity and sort of process adherence that hopefully is built into our platform. So somebody asked this question. I love questions, okay? This question said, what is the gold standard for demonstrating effective internal investigations beyond case closure times? This is the question, because this is the question, everyone has an answer for something, right? Leadership who doesn't understand the nuance of your operation, they think, okay, well, speed is the name of the game, or maybe low reports means things are healthy. Again, it's on us to help them see this operation and see the activities that we're doing through the right lens. And so I think talking about a couple of different aspects of your investigation process, or a couple of different, presenting a couple of different handles, can give leadership at least a better view of the dimensionality and the complexity of what you're dealing with. So they, presumably, the leadership are not all empty suits. Presumably, they have some brains, between their ears. And I think when you can start to show that, hey, this shape has some more facets than you think, they can start to appreciate not only what goes into that process, but they can appreciate perhaps the strategic value that this can provide, because we get access to a lot of information, a lot of risk intelligence that does not necessarily make its way up to leadership. And also, we'll be talking about this later on, doesn't talk about, what the impact is. Everyone is looking for a metric to kind of hold on to. So when you have corrective action plans associated with your speed metric, hey, we've dropped our case closure time significantly, but we've also maintained an 85% corrective action plan adherence across all of our categories. That starts to get them to understand that the end of an investigation, when the clock stops for case closure time, does not mean that that's the end of something. That usually creates a loop that needs to be closed. Okay, so do remediation commitments actually get closed out? Incorporating your corrective action plans or your remediation plan metrics along with your case closure time velocity can do a lot to kind of open their eyes. Also, think about what are changes, what insights do you have that you can present that are going to be insightful and interesting to leadership beyond some kind of a speed metric. Of course, speed is the ultimate strategy in business and in sports and pretty much everything, definitely mall walking, but we need to add some more dimensionality to that. So what about repeat reports? What about increases in reports in certain categories that correlate with initiatives that maybe the organization is pushing, or new policies that you may have rolled out? We want to show that ethics and compliance is this connective tissue throughout the organization. And we can't just wait for them to kind of put together all these data points, leadership. We can't wait for leadership to put all those data points together. So I think, the quick answer to this question, the gold standard for demonstrating effective internal investigations. I think it's in this first box. It's not just substantiation rate, which is kind of a metric that is education based in some levels. It's a slow metric insofar as it takes a long time for those substantiation rates to increase. And it's really kind of a function of the extent to which the stakeholders in the organization have digested your policies, your speak up program, everything that you need as an investigator in order to substantiate a report. We know when anonymous rates are high, people sometimes are not providing the right information for us, even to, we get a lot of unsubstantiatable reports is the point. But something we can control is what we do with the reports that come through. So process adherence is great. Corrective action plans is really the best receipt, in my mind, the best loop to close. And then there's a couple of other things like speed increases on triage. That's great. The rate of exceptions in terms of investigation approvals, that's another indicator of increased quality. And then overall documentation quality, this is something that's a little bit harder to quantify, but if you're overseeing an investigation operation and you have a couple of different investigators, you probably have some that always have great documentation and others that maybe you have to continually follow up or say, hey, you need to kind of button this kind of a thing up. So if you can if you can qualitatively start to see that rise, that's going to give you also a better another indicator of improved investigation quality. Here is a great question. So somebody asked this. This was an anonymous attendee asked this. Is there a golden ratio of investigators to employees? And the short answer is that no, there's not. Every business is going to be a little bit different. And we want to do the best with what we have. We all probably want to have some more people on our team. We probably want some more resources. We all probably want a little bit of a better budget. And so, like I always say, the best benchmark for your organization is your organization. And so when you can hold certain variables constant and you can start to see some improvement in investigation quality, velocity, substantiation rate, cap adherence rate, things like that, those can give you some indications that you are improving the operation. But there's no, there's no short answer that yes, you need for every 100 reports, you need three people, especially because the nature of the reports for different organizations are going to be very, very different. The mix of HR, somebody stole my sriracha from the break room type reports relative to, full blown investigations, reports are going to vary significantly by industry, by organization size, and so forth. So I think the real things to kind of think about are case volume and case complexity. How complex are your cases? And all the better if you have analytics available at your fingertips where you can analytically and objectively make the case for new resources should you need them. So much of our job, again, you're probably going to hear me say this 30 times today, but so much of our job is influence and persuasion. What's nice about investigations, what's nice about, a speak up program is you have tons and tons of data points in order to craft your story and build your case for things. So if you've seen your reporting rate go up and your case closure, rate go down, and your and case complexity based on a mix of your categories has gone up, well, you might be able to point to, hey, I definitely need another investigator because we're falling so far behind our benchmark. In our industry, everybody's closing their cases in 30 days, and we're still struggling closing our cases in 45 days, right? We need to be able to advocate for ourselves and come with some boldness and some confidence to the controller of the purse strings to get what we need. So again, happy to brainstorm. I've done this dozens of times with folks, helping them to brainstorm and build a strong case, whether it's going to the board or going to the CFO to get some of those additional resources that could really help to move the needle. But think about another thing, if that's an immovable object, if the budget that you have, do the best with what you got what you got, and don't throw a fit, you know what I mean? Then you need to look for opportunities to optimize your process. So again, we always talk about zooming out of your process, sort of stepping out of the weeds and seeing from a higher level, what are the major steps within my operation? Where are cases where are our investigations, getting held up? Which types of cases can I find a correlation between cases that are aged longer with a particular investigator? They might need some more training with a particular location. Maybe that individual, maybe we want to triage something faster of a particular category. Maybe we need some better intake and things like that. So in any multi-step process, there's always at least there's always a single bottleneck. If you can identify that bottleneck, again, I'm talking about in the context of like the budget is fixed, you're not going to be able to advocate for more investigators. You have to kind of solve the puzzle that is on, you got to solve the puzzle that's in front of you. And it's helpful to start looking at this as a business process to identify those bottlenecks. Okay, very good. There are some questions in the chat. I am sorry if I'm going too fast, but again, this is going to be on YouTube and you can control the speed very easily there. Okay. I love this question. This question was, where's the highest risk point of failure inside investigations? Okay. Is it on intake? Is it on triage? Is it leveraging AI? Is it on case analysis? Where does bias get baked in and where are these points of failure? So it's a good broad question because points of failure can kind of manifest in a bunch of different ways. If you're leveraging AI, it can, a point of failure can be there. If it's on triage and the report gets routed to the wrong person, there's a point of failure there. If it is in, case analysis, there's a point of failure if it takes you a really long time to build those analyses. If there's bias among your investigators where there's not consistent investigative equity, that's a point of failure there. So I think it's, again, smart to kind of zoom out of this a little bit and kind of put on paper, at least from a hypothesis perspective, what are the potential types of points of failure that could exist in an investigation process, and start to see if you can validate whether any of those things might be occurring within your operation. Okay, so think about, let's kind of walk through a couple of these pieces. So like triage is a great point of failure. Sometimes things get routed to the wrong area. Sometimes intake, if you're using an organization that outsources it, intake might be miscategorized and that might fall into the wrong channel, right? It might get shot to the wrong, group or whatever. So analyzing how that triage works, leveraging automation where possible, or maybe the answer is to make sure that you put eyes on that triage operation and enable somebody on your team to, play air traffic controller and pass those things out faster. You can really address if it's a recurring sort of systemic problem on triage, there are multiple ways to kind of address that. Think about building human reviews. If we're trying to attack bias in the investigation itself, that's a massive point of failure in an investigation. Or if you're leveraging AI a lot in terms of writing case summaries or things like that, make sure that you have a human in the loop. Let's not think about human in the loop as something that only should apply to AI. If you have a team of several investigators who maybe aren't as trained or don't have the pattern recognition that you as an overseer or as a manager of that operation have, make sure that you're at least doing some kind of sampling or using workflows. On our platform, we have approval workflows where things of a certain severity or things of a certain or investigation of a certain severity or of a particular category can be routed to somebody, whether it's you or somebody on a different team, to make sure that you can take that cursory glance and ensure that this case has been documented appropriately and that and there's none of that bias sort of creeping its way in. And the last thing I'll talk about is having visibility into some kind of an audit trail. So whether that's every single click in the platform, sometimes that's overload, but being able to audit and make sure that your team is following the process that you have laid out, leveraging templates, things like that can reduce the sort of volatility of investigations across various different categories. But have this kind of habit of auditing. This is not like you have to bring the external auditors in to this, but pausing, setting an hour every quarter for you to, jump into your case management system and see how investigations have been going, if processes have been followed, particularly if you're not utilizing all the technology that's out there. We need to first get ourselves comfortable with the job that we're doing. And if we can satisfy ourselves, assuming that, we have common sense and we have any level of, decent pattern recognition, that's going to solve 85, 95% of external parties, whether that's leadership or, external auditors. When we have done those kinds of audits, we're always ready then with an answer if questions come up about the efficacy of our program and the decisions that we have made. So carve out time for that important non-urgent work to optimize your program, optimize your investigation process. This is a game of continuous improvement. So we have to always be looking at, are there new correlations between what's coming through our, through our reporting channels? Are there opportunities for us to improve velocity without compromising quality by turning on a feature that maybe we're not utilizing? If you if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're not just going to magically wander to the top of the mountain. That takes a lot of intentionality. So carve that time out to optimize your process. And I guarantee you're going to find opportunities to drive improvement and really live out the continuous improvement sort of ethos that the rest of your organization is pushing for. Okay. We're going to have a whole section on this. This was a great question from our good friend, Wendy Badger. Wendy, we got to connect soon because we have, I still got a Post-it note on my desk for that idea that we had. Wendy always has great comments in the chat and always has great questions. So she asked, what belongs on the board board dashboard? So I always want to tell folks, all you can focus on are activities, but we don't want to report activities. We want to report on impact. And some of that takes some crafting and some of that takes an eye for influence, okay? So the board doesn't need to know, I never want the audience thinking, so what? I got to tell them the so what. Okay, so if I'm talking about activities, I got to tie that down to a so what that ties into something that they care about, or ultimately that's some kind of an impact. Okay, so the board doesn't need to know how many cases were opened. They need to know what movement in those cases means. What does that indicate in the context of organizational risk? Remember what your role is. Your role is not to push papers around and click check boxes and put policies on the shelf. Your role is to figure out where the hotspots are in the organization and be that specialized, SEAL Team 6 risk attacking function that we are uniquely positioned to do. We need to have a little bit of pride in what we do in ethics and compliance. We have an extremely unique skill set. We have access to various different parts of the organization. That access in itself is very unique. And we have access to a ton of risk intelligence that not everybody gets to see. We should be ingesting this stuff and taking advantage of this position that we're in consistently to boil up to the top insights that can help improve the business. As we de-risk the business, that professionalizes the business, that increases the enterprise value of the business. And that's what everybody in the board and everybody in the executive level cares about. So when we have confidence in that kind of a connection, we have confidence in the role that we have, we're not trying to keep our job. We're trying to put a bat on the ball and actually improve the bottom line by lowering the volatility within our operation. So these require, these board level metrics, think about, talking about anonymity rate and what that means. Think about talking about changes in reporting rate versus the benchmark of our peers. We have some good strategies in which we'll be talking about later, on how to better frame those things. Remember, you control the frame. This is your operation. These are your pieces of data. These are your insights to present. You control the frame. So draw the frame around it and provide insights that they're going to be like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. Oh my gosh, these guys are way more valuable than I ever thought. Okay. That's on you to draw that frame around the picture that you're painting. Okay. What about substantiation rate trends? If you see your substantiation rate going down, well, then you should be leaning on the fact that, hey, we're leveraging corrective action plans. We've had a lot of turnover in the organization. We've seen substantiation rates go down. As reporting rates and anonymous rates have gone up, we've compensated for that by leaning into corrective action plans. So we're ensuring that organizational and investigative equity is a bedrock of our operation, but we have a trust problem going on in our organization, right? Help them see around the curve. Don't just put up a bunch of metrics. And again, try to tie the data that you are presenting to them down to the organizational objectives. The organization always has objectives. They always have, strategic objectives that they're shooting for. We can always intersect with those things because the things we do touch all of the component pieces and all the components within the engine that is the organization. Okay. So your internal diagnostic toolkit is going to be a little bit different than those board metrics, right? What are those fast gauges that we want to be monitoring on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis so that we can, again, make better bets with our time? This, anybody who thinks compliance is boring, you know what I say? You're boring. Because guess what? There's so many different pieces of the puzzle. There's so many different levers for us to pull. And there's so many different bets that we can make. Nobody, plays poker just going all in on every single hand. They crap out pretty quickly. So we have a set of resources. We have access that other people don't have. And we have a specific skill set. And we have, My point is we have the opportunity to make a bunch of different bets with our time and do things differently depending on what the organization needs. If there's a bunch of AI use cases and you came to the session on Tuesday, you're like, you know what? I need to allocate some more time to this thing because this is what the organization needs. You have to grab the steering wheel of your career and grab the steering wheel for your program. So case closure timelines by category, have reports built, in our platform, you can schedule reports. There's tons of different, you can replace Power BI just by utilizing the reports in there, and you can schedule those. So you don't even have to go into the system, but those can show up every week or every single month. And give yourself the room to change course, to call an audible at the line like Peyton Manning used to do as the defense changes, as the risk, that you're reading out on the field starts to change. You have that flexibility. You don't have to ask permission for those things. You're in this role for a reason. All right, I got to keep moving here because, man, I am going. All right, this is a great question here. When reporting rates rise, should we be worried? Again, this all comes down to the frame. I'm shocked. I've been in this industry for a decade. I'm shocked that this is still a conversation that we're having, particularly at the leadership level. Hey, no news is good news. That doesn't work really with anything. Okay, when my kids are playing and it's too quiet, I'm like, something's going on up there. Something's going wrong. Okay. High reporting rates is not a sign that the organization has more problems. It's a sign that your program has more trust. We have to frame that right. And it's particularly important to have boldness and confidence on this thing. Only if I'm wrong and you're wrong, or only if I'm right and you're right, that our job is to find risk intelligence and make better bets with our time and make better decisions on behalf of the organization, A, and B, that there's probably a lot more risk intelligence existing in the organization than any of us know about. Anybody who's managed a team or anybody who has kids or anybody who has been surprised by their car breaking down knows that there's probably a lot more risks out there than are on our radar. So we want to be if I ever hear, in a board meeting, or I'm helping somebody prep for their board meeting, the reporting rate went down last quarter and they were really thrilled about that. I'm like, you got to attack that direct and head on. You have to overcome that objection in real time. And there's a lot of objection handling sort of methodologies, but if you can acknowledge that, but then totally reframe it, like there are orders of magnitude more risk intelligence in our organization. The fact that we're now, instead of getting 1%, we're getting 5% of this hypothetical risk intelligence out there. We should be patting ourselves on the back because we are engendering a lot, we've engendered a lot more trust and we're getting the benefit of that trust. Every leader that I know, they want to find things that are wrong and improve them. We're all living in this sort of continuous improvement mode. And so no news is not good news in the context of an organization. So our clients average about 3.8 reports per 100 employees. The status quo, the 8,000 pound orangutan in the industry does about 1.6. Regardless of where you're at, there's always more to get, okay? And so again, your best benchmark is yourself. What were you doing a year ago? What were you doing 2 years ago? How have you started to create new channels to get more of this risk intelligence? How have you been able to leverage the technology that is at hand to focus your eyes and focus your team's eyes on the things that matter most? Again, look at the percentage of your time and the percentage of your day in a week or whatever, where you are making decisions as opposed to pushing papers around, so to speak, okay? We want to increase that rate. And when we can leverage technology in a good way and we open up the floodgates through proxy reports with middle managers or through using disclosure forms as multiple different channels, we then can create the opportunities. We can stack the deck in our favor, so to speak, where we can then spend more of our time doing the things that are actually mitigating risk inside the organization. So your job in the room in these kinds of discussions is you're the only person who can make this argument credibly because you're the one closest to the flame, okay? So if you do not preempt this misread, the default interpretation wins. And so again, there's one of my favorite books is Never Split the Difference by this guy, Chris Voss, and he talks about the accusation audit, or maybe it's the objection audit. Just assume that this is in people's minds. And so pull that out and say, a lot of people might assume that as reporting rates go up, that that's bad news. That's an indication of more problems in the organization. And those people would be wrong. Those people are not looking at it right. And so when you can pull an objection out and then handle it without it even being said, that's an extremely effective way to drive some of that persuasion and that impact in that room that really matters, okay? We have to, and I'm just saying, we should have a whole session just on this particular topic. If you're not addressing that, like it says here, the default interpretation wins, and that then colors all those resource discussions. If you can reframe it and you can turn that light bulb on and you can help them see this paradox in a bit of a different way, then you have the opportunity to move their mind, to change their mind on this topic, especially around resource decisions. Okay. Somebody else, I think this came through email. Our substantiation rate dropped. Is our investigation team slipping? And so again, I just can't stress this enough. There are so many data points within your case management system. There are so many different things that you can cut against each other. It's usually a bad idea to just zero in on one particular metric and say that sort of colors the entire thing. Of course, we want to be analyzing these things and creating hypotheses that then we can test. And then if those are substantiated hypotheses, then we should direct our efforts in a different way. But your category mix might be changing. Your workforce mix might be changing. You may have done an acquisition and a bunch of people came over from another organization that might have a much higher reporting rate, but they didn't have the compliance program that you built. So there might be an education gap going on in your organization. So don't fall into the kind of sky is falling, kind of Chicken Little, tendency that some of us have. I know I do. Pause for a second and zoom out and say, okay, well, why might this be happening? Sure, maybe you have a whole brand new team of investigators that haven't been trained and they're not following your process. That could be an indication of something bad. But this also could be an indication of something that's like exogenous that you then want to go ahead and make some change. So think about doing your analysis on category changes, on year-over-year changes, and access shifts. So it's always a best practice on your ethics portal page or on communications that you send out, hopefully periodically, about your Speak Up program and the importance of it. Have available there kind of an FAQ that talks about the type of information that allows you, hey, first, let me sell you on, I want to do something about this. This is not a Speak Up program. This is a Listen Up program. If you're speaking, we're going to listen. You have a bunch of people in the compliance and ethics and HR department that actually want to fix the things inside the organization. Once you can overcome that and you can get people into sort of more of an open state where they're willing to share these kinds of things, then it's about making sure that they are equipped, whether in an identified or in an anonymous reporting capacity, they are equipped to provide you with the information. Remember that old movie, Help Me Help You? Make it easy for them to help you. Make sure that you have made it very clear the information you need in order to substantiate those reports. Because usually, unless you're able to cluster together a bunch of unsubstantiated reports that are kind of speaking to the same thing, we usually need that substantiation to make some significant real change, okay? All right, our anonymous rate jumped. What does that tell us? Okay, this is another great question. Okay, so an anonymous rate spike usually traces back to a management issue or a recent organizational change, not a program failure. We need to recognize that our organization is full of human beings. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy, what's at the bottom down there? It's like air, food. It's all like the self-preservation stuff. At the top of that pyramid, we have all the self-actualization stuff. When people are worried about those base level needs, our natural wiring as human beings kicks in, our natural desire for self-preservation kicks in, and that's why there are anonymous rates in general. We all know that there's probably more retaliation going on in our organizations than we would like. I think a drop of retaliation in the ocean is too much. I'm sure you do as well. But if the ECI reports are true, which I think they are, something like 50% of people face some kind of retribution, those who spoke up. So even, we've said this before, but even if you're twice as good as everybody else, that's still 1 in 4 people. And maybe there's zero retaliation in your organization, but think about the turnover that's happening. You have ethical refugees coming from other organizations where retaliation was maybe a mainstay, okay? So all these things are headwinds for the type of scenario where we're getting, 100% identified people. So let's recognize that this is a natural, this is a natural thing, right? Like if you have a car, your car is going to get dirty. It's a natural it's a natural occurrence. So our job then is to identify when those changes are happening, try to diagnose what might be driving them, and come over top of that with more persuasion and more influence on the organization to say, hey, we're really serious about retaliation. Like that's the number one reason people stay, anonymous, right? we're really serious about stamping out retaliation in our organization. And then do the things you say that you're going to do. Prove that commitment with your actions. Following up with callers 30, 60, 90 days down the line, seeing if they've seen any more retaliation. That does a lot. That spreads a lot of goodwill throughout the organization, and everybody talks, you know what I mean? So following up with those people and showing, wow, I really do, my organization really does care about this. You should be able to systematize that. You can put those in your corrective action plans in the Ethico system, of course. But even if it's just setting a reminder to say the first day of every quarter, somebody on the team is going to reach out to everybody who was identified or everybody who was even anonymous, communicate through the anonymous, communication channel, through the case management system, and follow up with those people and maybe send them to a disclosure form that exists that, is your anti-retaliation disclosure form, and say, please fill this out. You can say anonymous in that, but just recognize that part of our job is, of course, process optimization, but part of our job is also kind of a marketing job. And we have to drive that influence and drive our message. We have to say it, 10 times, 10 ways across 10 different channels if we're going to really start to persuade our organization. So dive in. Again, you have tons of data points. You have tons of analytical capabilities inside your brain and inside the data that you're capturing in your case management system. Look at how, if you see this thing spike, start to kind of peel back the onion a little bit. If you see anonymous rate spike, I'm saying, peel back the onion. Is it spiking in certain categories? Is it spiking with certain divisions? Is it spiking with certain issue types or of certain severities? You can probably start getting some hints on where you might need to attack. But again, we can't paint with broad brushstrokes. Every day is a little bit different in ethics and compliance because everything's changing all the time. You know what I'm saying? So we need to be able to, periodically look down at our dashboard and look for reasons to reallocate our focus and reallocate our resources to the things that matter most. Okay, so we are. Okay, how do we know if our middle managers are actually working as a reporting channel? Well, they're probably not, or at least they're probably not working as good as they could be. Remember, people are 6 to 8 times more likely to go to their middle manager about a problem than they are to utilize a third party or anonymous channel that you have invested in and put in place. So you can very quickly look at, okay, well, how much is coming through my hotline and through my web form, and compare that to your quote unquote in-office or, proxy form reporter rate. If that proxy form reporter rate isn't 6 to 8 times, bigger, well, then there's probably a lot of risk intelligence still living on that middle manager level. Listen, maybe the 6 to 8 is this sort of ideal, this perfection that's never achievable. But until you start to measure it, until you start to monitor it, that metric is not going to move. How'd you like all those M's? So making it easy, equipping middle managers to be these extensions of your program, and making it easy, removing the friction for them to report that back into the central risk brain that is the ethics and compliance program, can do a lot for you to start to measure and say, okay, am I getting more of this intelligence? Again, this should be a great partnership throughout the organization, regardless of which departments inside the company these middle managers reside. It should be a great partnership between ethics and compliance. And when we can start to partner with these folks, it makes it extremely easy and extremely fast for us to elevate out of this office of no. We want to move from the office of no to the office of now. We can't move to the office of now unless we're running kind of side by side, hip to hip with the middle managers throughout our organization, who are phenomenal assets for us if we do it right, okay? So your action is to train your middle managers. You can Google right now, Control T, Command T, whatever, open a new tab and do Ethico Middle Manager Toolkit. That's going to that's going to take you directly to a page where there's a bunch of resources for free, of course, because I love you. A bunch of resources that you can leverage, templates you can download, things that you can utilize in order to start enabling your middle managers. But remember, nothing is like a magic wand in this game. Okay, you got to do it a bunch of times. I told, if you knew how many times I had to tell my children to say please and thank you, you would die. Okay, thousands and thousands of times. So we just have to keep pushing it. We have to keep pushing toward making our vision a reality. Our vision is not just magically going to bloom in front of us. We have to affect the world. Okay, we have to bend the world to our will. Okay, I'm being a little dramatic here, but if you're not getting the participation from middle managers, what is the high agency thing you can do to start bringing them into the fold? We got a bunch of resources there for you. Download those for free and start making that future your reality. I guess this is going to be a 3-hour session, okay? Because we are only on slide not too far. We got a bunch more questions to get to. How do we think about departing employee reports as an early indicator? So again, I kind of think of everything is everything. Okay. So our hotline reports or our anonymous code of conduct reports, that's just one flavor of risk intelligence. I want to see all the risk intelligence. I want to get all of the instances of risk inside the organization so that I again, can make better bets with the resources that have been entrusted to me to mitigate the risks that I'm responsible for mitigating. Okay. Or at least, at least identifying. When you start to think about exit and stay interviews as a different thing, as an HR thing, as opposed to, we do hotline reports and, they handle that. If you can get visibility into those things, if you can fold that in, even if you're just doing a sampling, we've had several clients over the last, 18 months start to do stay interviews on a sampling basis where they're sampling 10% of their employee base each quarter or something like that. That just gives you more of this risk intelligence from a stay perspective. That helps you, the ROI on stay interviews when you can identify things, especially in the context of an increasing turnover rate. The ROI is extremely easy to argue for. If nothing else, capturing those exit interviews can allow for, again, to this question, those early indicators for something that we might need to fix. Because the big impediment for somebody sharing risk intelligence, this fear, the self-preservation issue, is not on the table anymore. They found a new job. They're already leaving the organization. They're not concerned about retaliation at your organization anymore. So again, take advantage of the resources you have. Move the pieces on the chessboard. Anytime you can look at the chessboard, you can always find what's the next best move. And so sometimes the layout of the pieces are not how you want them to be. Maybe you've inherited a program that you didn't build. Maybe your leadership, mistakenly, erroneously doesn't see the value inside of your program, and they've cut the budget. That sucks. Okay, fine. But what's the next best move? Stack the deck in your favor. Okay. All right, we got about 15 minutes left. Let's jump into one of the most under-investigated areas of most programs. So if an employee wanted to report something today, how many steps would it take for them to find your channel? There has been a big shift in channel awareness. It's all internet right now, right? So we need, this other communication though has now captured, it's more than doubled in 2025, okay? So this now encompasses AI assistants, internal messaging platforms, Slack, whatever, Teams, things like that, informal channels, conversations, and things like that across the organization. So the impact of printed materials are declining. I'm not saying delete the printed materials, but recognize that the world is moving beyond that. We used to all watch, 3 channels, 3 TV channels when we were younger. And then there was cable, and then there were multiple TVs inside the house. And then, viewing rates of shows sort of dropped commensurately. There was more competition for the eyeballs in the family. There was more sort of targeting by, TV producers to get different demographics. How much more has that fractured now when everybody has a phone and so forth? That is a perfect analogy for how we need to think about awareness. We can't just put a poster on the wall. Everybody's working from home. There's all these different channels. So start to think about how this has shifted and start to hear 3 questions to ask about your program's findability. How easy is it? How much friction is it for someone to find out about your program, to get their questions answered about how to speak up? What is that program? What does that process look like? What protections are in place and so forth? So AI and messaging test, that's a great test. So if an employee used your company's internal AI assistant, how do I report something? Does it give them the right answer with the right phone number and so forth? Do the search test. Open up an incognito browser. Careful with those incognito browsers, by the way. Open up an incognito browser and start to search your company name, reporting options, and things like that. If you're not at the top of that page or toward the, on that first page of search results, well, there's probably some changes that you can make to your ethics portal so that it's more findable and easier to find. And then what about the word of mouth audit? So word of mouth still drives between 1 in 6 and 1 in 5 of the discovery, of these reports, depending on the sector that you're in. So how does your word of mouth as a source compare to those averages? Again, these are all metrics and these are all things that you can fix. These are all things that you can adjust and you can influence. But again, it takes some concerted, focused effort on it. If you're not getting any word of mouth, that's a massive opportunity for you to make some slight tweaks. Again, if you have a program in place, we're not saying to burn the house down, burn down the forest so it can regrow anew. No, we're talking about making small tweaks to the things that are in place. That's how you optimize something. So change your directives a little bit. Add a couple of steps to your corrective action plans or to your follow-ups. Say thank you to anybody that you interview, and watch that word of mouth really spread. But your findability is a big thing that I think ends up flying below the radar, so to speak. So, like I said, search your intranet. Again, try to find, audit your digital channels. Make sure that those are existing. Make sure that those are updated and are reflecting your vision for what 2026 and beyond should have from a. It's so hard when we're so close to this thing to see everything with fresh eyes. But with a little intentionality, you can bring some fresh eyes to anything. Bring that sort of beginner's mindset or bring those fresh eyes to your operation. And you're probably going to find, if you can divorce yourself from what you may have created, you can probably find some opportunities to improve it, okay? And finally, track and check your awareness source data. If you're one of our clients, that is contained in all of your reports, but make sure your middle managers on your middle manager proxy form are also tracking that. What made you want to speak up about this, right? If you can start to track some information, if you can build easy reports that are at your fingertips within your system or put them on your dashboard, then you can start to measure those things in real time and make the changes and make the tweaks that are going to actually move the needle. Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. I'm going fast, I know it, but we love this, okay? So who is actually submitting reports? Okay, in the 2026 benchmark report, there were two big headlines on reporter types. I think one is regarding things that most programs track, and the other is that a lot of programs end up missing entirely. So anonymous and withheld reporters surged from about 2% to 12%. Okay, this is the largest single year shift in our benchmark reporting history. The other one, this is the underappreciated finding, is that vendor and contractor reports were substantiated at almost 3 out of 4. Okay, so that's a gold mine of risk intelligence that's highly substantiatable, that we want to be, again, who cares where it's coming from? Who cares if it's coming through a disclosure form or it's someone slipping a ransom note style, note under the door with magazine, titles, kind of, word letters, clipped out. I just want to see the risk intelligence so that I can make better bets with my time and drive better decisions for my organization. So this vendor intelligence paradox, I think, is extremely interesting. Vendors and contractors, like I said, are a substantiation risk rich reporter type, almost 3 out of 4 versus the 60% kind of across everybody else, okay? In financial services, vendor and contractor reports made up 20% of intake, far above other sectors. So if this is not on your radar and you're not even thinking about how to, pull these ripe apples from this edge of the orchard, well, then you want to think about that, because this is, again, ample ripe risk intelligence for you to start to fold into your decision-making process in the way that you're organizing your team and directing your troops, okay? So think about this design question. Do you have on your ethics portal a form that's dedicated just to vendors, or one that's just dedicated to contractors or things like that? If a vendor reports through your hotline, does the experience feel like it's designed for them? Do you have directives in place for your intake channel to say, hey, if a vendor calls, read this statement, or if a vendor calls, really try to get this extra information so that my investigator can follow up? There is also a self-preservation thing in many cases that is not present with some of these other types of stakeholders, right? So we want to take advantage of that, because again, I don't care whether it's my, somebody's telling me something's on fire, or it's the smoke alarm, or I see it myself. I just want to put the fires out, okay? So do intake prompts reference internal systems or employee-specific processes that they might not recognize? Those are going to be points of friction for this ripe group of risk intelligence. Is the language accessible to somebody outside of your organization? Are the acknowledgement and follow-up communication designed for someone without an employee ID? You're hopefully capturing email addresses and things like that. Also, you'll notice that the anonymous rate for these folks is also significantly lower than the average employee, okay? So think about the gap between your highest value reporters and your intake experience, and make sure that it's designed for the various constituents, the various groups that are gonna be interacting with your risk management apparatus, okay? So let's talk a little bit about reading the report type mix. A shift in who is reporting, even when total volume is stable, is a signal that's worth interpreting. So again, Just looking at reporting rate, that tells you something. That's maybe just broad participation. But if we can double click on that and we can see reporting rate composition by reporter types, that's going to give us some extra clues on where we might want to dedicate some more resources or dedicate some more focus. So anonymous and withheld trend, look at that over the last couple of years. Have we seen spikes in different reporter types, in different category types? Know the difference before you present something to the board. Try to anticipate, this is kind of just a side, here's like a bonus tip, okay? Try to anticipate the questions that people might ask. I love being a little intentionally vague because that gives me a gauge as to how engaged somebody is. Okay, so if I can be a little vague, and I can then drive a little bit more of an interaction, I can get some more information about what my adversary, I'm talking about my own board here. Okay, I'm glad they don't watch these. What they are thinking about and what they're most concerned about. If I fill the tub with all the information, I end up losing them. So try to anticipate in general the types of things that your board is going to want to ask and stay a little bit higher level. Of course, you probably know those details. If you have your laptop, there with you in those meetings, you can click over to your dashboard and, move something around, add another filter and get down to their answer if they're doing something that you haven't anticipated. But I'm looking for interaction. I'm looking for a back and forth, a conversation with the board. That's what you do with a partner. That's what you do with someone that you're collaborating with. I don't want to just be doing a lecture despite what the last hour has felt like, okay? Vendor contractor reports by sector, take a look at those. How does that compare to the benchmark? Download the benchmark report and you can see, or just compare over time. Have you seen a change in the trend or the change in the report count or the proportion of total reports that are coming from these underserved or these groups that maybe fly a little bit below the radar? And then think about what is your departing employee rate. Try to lean toward getting more risk intelligence. Get it by hook or by crook, any way you can get it. So here are your actionable takeaways for reporter types. Segment your reporter type data. Segment that by location, with anonymous rates, with substantiation rates, and so forth. There's probably going to be some great clues there. If you're able to incorporate your departing employees in this, all the better. You're going to get some great insights from that. Try to incorporate those in your reporting as well. Review your intake experience from a vendor's perspective. Call your hotline and do a test call and act as a vendor and see, is this treated any different? Wait a couple of days and call it, call as an employee, wait a few days, call again as a vendor and see if that experience is different. That's if you're bringing fresh eyes to this thing, if you're coming to this with your beginner's mindset, as if you were just stepping into the program that you've built or that you've been a part of, you're going to notice things that, by, living sort of in the woods, you're not going to sort of notice, right? So look for opportunities on how you can make those changes and make all these things, all these tools that you have work for you in the context of your vision for where your program. Without a vision, you will perish, okay? So you got to have a vision for how you want your program to go, where you want it to improve, and then you'll magically, with the magic brain, the magic golden brain that you have, this goal-seek mechanism that we're all born with, you're automatically going to start finding new opportunities to make those changes and improve your program, okay? If you don't have anonymous two-way communication, that's another thing that you should be utilizing and so forth. Okay, so think about this thing. This is section 5. I'm going so fast here. We got 2 minutes left. I don't guess we're not going to get through this. Story of my life. Okay. So we have a 19-point gap that is a big intake story. So what we're talking about, we skipped this in section 1. And this is an actionable, I think this is an operationally actionable finding from the benchmark report. So there is a big gap in follow-ups between the status quo, 31%, a third, versus the Ethico clients. This is average follow-up for issued reports, okay? 12% versus 31%, that's a 19-point gap in between, okay? So what I want you to think about is, regardless of whether you're locked in a contract or regardless of if you're with us, compare your follow-up rates over time and think about it in the context of investigation quality. Intake quality and investigation how fast are we following up? How frequently are we following up with our reporters? When we can anticipate the kind of questions that people are going to have and read statements to them during that intake, we're going to be able to reduce those unmet expectations. We're going to be able to naturally reduce our follow-up rate. Listen, I'm not saying like we want to reduce follow-up rates, point blank period. I'm saying that if unnecessary follow-ups that are a function of gaps in somebody's expectations or gaps in their understanding of how this process should work, those are follow-ups that we can anticipate and we can get out ahead of. Hey, thank you so much for this. Because you're an anonymous reporter, we tried to capture as much information as possible. We're not going to be able to follow up with you because you haven't provided your email address. Would you like to provide that? It's going to be totally masked. Okay. How can you change that intake process? And how can you emulate what the experience somebody might have if they're coming directly into your office? How can you emulate that with better, more clear instructions for your third party that is an extension of your team to have a similar type of experience for those employees? Okay. So think about this gap and think about how your follow-up rate may have changed over time. Here's a little sprinkling of another question. If investigators keep asking the same follow-up questions, what does that tell me? I would tell you that there's probably something systemic that you can address through a Q of A, through an FAQ. I'm just going to keep going for a couple of minutes here so you guys can check this on the replay. So if you can stay long, great. If not, I'll speak to a room by myself. I'll just be talking to Chase anyways. Okay. The most powerful intake improvements available to the most programs cost nothing to implement. It really just takes a little bit of intentionality. So identify 5 questions, map to missing prompts, map to missing pieces of information or education, and run a small campaign through Teams, through email, whatever, that address those kinds of things to reduce those unnecessary follow-ups. Listen, if people are following up with more information, phenomenal, great. If somebody's following up to say, hey, still haven't heard anything, and that intake channel has not been instructed to say, well, there's no way for us to follow up with you because you stayed anonymous and you didn't give any information. Let me tell you a little bit about the masked email feature that your company has invested in order, to kind of handle situations like this. Add to the intake form. There's more information that you can provide. Again, we should be able to anticipate. This is a living, breathing thing, our compliance program. It should always be changing and always improving. If it's something that's etched in stone, that crystalline structure will shatter as more force is applied to it, right? As more volatility is applied to it. Well, we live in a very volatile world, okay? And then measure your 90-day success rate. Create a hypothesis. In 90 days, I hope to see this rate drop 5%. That's going to force you to just naturally start to measure it. If you can start to measure it, you'll see kind of along the way, are we moving the needle? Is this metric moving accordingly? And if it's not, well, then we need to double down on our efforts, or maybe we had the wrong hypothesis. I'm just trying to get us all into this continuous improvement mode, because what got us here is not going to get us there. 10 years from now, ethics and compliance is either going to be the strategic lever at all the board tables. All of our careers will have totally progressed and broken through whatever glass ceilings we felt over the last 10 years, or it's just going to kind of be the same. And so I'm fighting every single week. Our Ethico is, and our team, we're fighting every single week on trying to equip those of us, whether you're a client or not. If you're just a practitioner in this space, I feel like we're all fighting the same battle. Equip you with new mindsets and new frameworks so that we can elevate ourselves and become the strategic lever to equip us with the confidence to build a program that is viewed as the strategic lever that it can be. Okay. So I can go all day talking about this, but there's just such an opportunity in front of us. We have such an opportunity to build programs that have actual impacts inside of our organization, that are easy to build the ROI case for, that are easy to point to the impacts of, but it's going to take us being a little bit more nimble, a little bit more dynamic, and a little bit more willing to fall into the continuous improvement mode that every other department in the organization is in. Listen, if we want to show up as a business person, we want to show up as a strategic advisor, or show up, as Ross Ronan says, as a compliance executive, well, that takes us putting on the mantle of a business person and getting into a continuous improvement mode and connecting to the objectives of the organization. Okay, this is a great question. This comes up all the time. Should there be a hard ceiling on case age? The short answer is no, right? We always want to have some kind of a benchmark. I just think it's valuable to have a benchmark, but also let's have some common sense around it, right? The industry benchmark is you want to close your cases on average within 30 days or less. That, of course, does not mean that a highly complex, case that naturally, if it's done right, that takes 9 months is violating this ceiling. What you might want to do is have triggers in place in your workflows or in your approval workflows that can give notifications to you or to a supervisor over the investigation team if things of a certain severity or of a particular category or just in general are aging long. If something is aging out beyond my benchmarks, I want to know that, okay, fine, good, that should age longer. If there's a bunch of stuff, though, that's aging out beyond the benchmark, and it's really something as simple as, oh, this person forgot to click click close, well, that's going to create a bunch of noise in my analytics that are going to ultimately lead to either me spending too much time getting ready for my board report because I have to go through and freaking weed the garden and fix all of these things, or it might lead me to make some incorrect decisions, or it might make somebody on the other side who I haven't sort of controlled the frame for enough make the wrong or have the wrong impression and make the wrong decision about my entire program. So again, we need to see around the curve, not just for our organization's sake, but we need to see around the curve for our own career's sake and our own department's sake, and kind of anticipate how things can kind of get off the tracks. So substantiation rate holds at a kind of a 52 to 54% across this 0 to 90 day window, but then it drops down below that 50% mark after 90 plus days. So just keep in mind that longer cases aren't automatically better cases. Longer investigations aren't automatically more, higher quality investigations. Some are, though, naturally going to age beyond that time. So this is not a one size fits all kind of a business. If you want that, you should be in a factory pulling levers and pushing buttons and spitting out widgets. That's not the game that we're in. Everything is changing all the time. And we have to bring our high IQs to these conversations and to the administration of our program. Okay, the abandonment rate problem. Are we missing reports we didn't know about? If you're sitting down, if you're standing up, sit down. If you're sitting down, please lay on a couch. If you're already laying on the couch, lay on the floor, because the answer is absolutely yes. Okay. There's always fish, you go deep sea fishing. There's always going to be some fish that bite the line that you're not able to reel in. So our job is to try to minimize that as much as possible. So there's a bunch of things that you can do to try to minimize your abandonment rate. The abandonment rate lives on a form that's too complex where somebody half fills it out and they end up closing the tab. The abandonment rate lives on a form that's not really optimized for mobile. And someone's like, screw this, this isn't even worth it. The abandonment rate lives, here's controversial, it lives in a manager who doesn't end up reporting it, because then there's nothing that you can do about it. And of course, the abandonment rate lives on your hotline intake channel when calls are not answered live and someone's listening to a bunch of music like they're standing in an elevator. I love careless whisper, but enough with the careless whisper. You know what I mean? There's abandonment rate. There are abandonment reports throughout our organization. Okay. So a couple of things you can do are, first, to try to measure your abandonment. Okay. Try to design a drop-off point and try to ensure that expectations on intake are set. Okay. When we can manage those expectations and we can start to measure this kind of a thing, we can enable middle managers in particular, or we can look at, again, with fresh eyes, the forms that we have in place. We can usually find some points of friction that are probably creating some kind of a headwind for us. But again, like, at some level, you can say, let's say there's 40 reports per 100. Maybe that's low, okay? We're talking about Ethico is getting 4 per 100. Status quo is getting 1.6. Call it 2 per 100. That's a lot of reports in the middle. So think about all those as abandoned reports. So there's a lot of risk intelligence that is floating throughout the organization. There's a lot of fish in the sea, right? Some of those fish are biting the hook, and as you try to reel them in, they end up swimming off the hook. And then some of them end up making their way into the boat. So I want all the fish in the boat, okay? I want all the ones that touch the hook. I want to reel those in as well. And I want all the other fish in the sea also to know that this is a really fun boat to get into, okay? So we want to try to create the circumstances for that. Okay, this is section 6. This is the reframe that matters most. A high reporting rate isn't a sign your organization has more problems. We talked about this briefly, maybe long, maybe not so briefly before, but this is a sign that our program has more trust. We had Kilby on the podcast, the Ethics Experts, recently. If you haven't checked that episode out, you absolutely should. And we were talking about this thing, and she has a really good way of reframing this. She works at a large organization, a bunch of smart people at that organization. And so the occurrence of this mindset, of this incorrect conclusion at leadership, is not an indication that they're idiots, okay? Although they might be, right? It's not an indication that they're idiots. It's just they're thinking about it wrong. They haven't looked at it the right way. They haven't considered it the way that you have. So it's on you to, convince them or show them or reframe the conclusion that they might have. So how do I walk into the board meeting with more than a status update? Well, I think we have to take a couple of steps. We have to, first of all, we have to zoom out, and we have to think about, what impact do I want to have here? How do I want these people to feel at the end of this presentation? Then let's first think about industry context. Where are the benchmarks for our industry? Where are the benchmarks, from the benchmark report, or comparing certain metrics to, the industry benchmarks within that report? Okay. Then think about your position, whether you're above it, at, or below those particular benchmarks. Those are going to give you clues on how you're going to want to go ahead and frame those things. And then finally, we always want to tie these things down to an implication. I never want my audience to say, so what? I never want to go through a whole slide and then they're just like, okay, and that is like a fail, okay? So we want to make sure that we're always tying down to a why. We're always connecting to something that they care most about, the business objectives, a level of risk, some actions that we are taking, some indications that the data has led us to, reprioritize our efforts or, our resources or whatever. The board understands relative performance. That's how they gauge everything, okay? They trust analysis that acknowledge a broader context. We want to bring that broader context. When we come in with an analysis that's all based on activities, and we come in with quote unquote insights that aren't insights at all, that are merely a recounting of, we're looking at it. We're looking at our world through a little pinhole, okay? And we're just recounting all the things that happened last quarter. And we're not tying those out to a broader context for the market, for the business objectives, for the risks that our industry might be facing. Then we're always going to fall flat, okay? And these guys always make decisions based on comparisons. So if you're not bringing those comparisons in, you're not going to be able to go anywhere, okay? So when you bombard them with an avalanche of data without any context, it's like somebody that's stuck in an avalanche. They don't even know which way to dig, okay? So you got to give them some indication of which way they need to dig by making some of those comparisons, and they live their life by that. They live their life on relative performance. They live their life on making bets on how something can marginally improve relative to another metric. So when you can step into that, that is the type of mentality and that's the type of posture we want to bring to those conversations to speak across the table. So we have an infographic that we'll be sending out. We got a couple of infographics. We have a summary of the last session about the benchmark report, and another one that really talks about how we can optimize our interactions with the board. So what is the 3-year view I should bring? The short answer for this, okay, so let's talk about this. A story isn't a single number. Or it's not a single number. A story is not a single sentence. There's a bunch of pages. There's a bunch of chapters. Okay. There's a bunch of things that go into a story. There's some movement in it, right? There's a problem. There's an inciting event. There's a problem. There's a resolution and so forth. So we need to think about our 3-year view as a story. And we need to think about what are we trying to solve in this story? What are going to be the indicators of success? And what is that future state going to look like? So you can tell stories around all of this stuff. Again, if you're just presenting a bunch of data, that's not going to move the needle. We need logos, of course, but we also need pathos. Logic makes you think, emotion makes you act. Stories are all emotional, right? The best stories are ones that are very emotional and all that kind of stuff, okay? So that evokes some kind of emotion from us, even if they're 2-star action flicks, which I seem to love. So reporting rate trends, let's tell a story about that. What is the rate rising? Is it falling? Who cares? What problem does that indicate? What success does that indicate? What are we going to do about it? Why should the board care about it? How about our anonymous rate? What game are we trying to play? Are we trying to get some more resources? Do we have a trust issue in the organization? Is the industry about to, or is your organization about to get blindsided by the trust issue with a lot of turnover or a lot of fear about AI taking people's jobs? Things like that. Come to these conversations with a position, with a viewpoint. You're never going to be an advisor unless you're advising. And an advisor is not just talking about things that were done. It's talking about where things are going and what we need to do to get there. Okay. So many different metrics. Think about what changed, what drove the change, and what are we doing about it? And then bonus points, if you can tie that to the business objectives, that's going to automatically make them care more about it. All right. I'm running out of steam here. We got a couple more slides. So I want you to think about using your benchmark as your argument. Okay. If any particular rate is below the benchmark, that is an argument for resources. So how can you frame out this shortfall relative to your peers or relative to others in the industry as an excuse for or an argument for the resources that you need? Hey, there's a lot more risk inside of our organization, and I need some new resources in order to do the job that you hired me to do. Okay, so you're not capturing the risk intelligence of that your peer organizations are. Okay, and the benchmark is your evidence for that investment. We can't come in and argue. You don't argue with should, okay? That's not like a romantic way to argue. Well, we just should do it. It's like, okay, well, we're not doing it. How's that, okay? But if we're saying that, like, well, we ought to do it, or I guess that is should. We should do it because of this, or because we're falling flat, and because there's going to be an implication to the thing you care about, ultimately enterprise value or bottom line or things like that. We need to tie it down to something beyond that conditional. If your rate is above the benchmark, that's a performance argument. So again, you got to control the narrative. Like, you can't just dump a bunch of data up there and just be like, so what do you think? It's like, no, tell them what you want them to think. What conclusion do you want them to have? Listen, Hollywood does this all the time. When you see a preview for a movie, before you even go to the movie, you kind of know what the shape of that movie is. You know what kind of a ride that's going to be. They're already telling you how they want you to feel with that movie, right? Whether it's a romance or it's a drama or it's a horror movie or whatever, you get those indications. They're already telling you implicitly how they want you to feel with this kind of a movie. You need to take that same agency and that same license with your presentations. And listen, you're built to influence, okay? When you were a baby, this is in that book, Influence is Your Superpower. When you were a baby, you were an influence machine. You would cry and you would get milk. You would cry and you would get, moved, or you get put to bed. At some point, we start to think, oh, I can't influence anymore. And we kind of close off our light and our brightness. And I'm saying, knock those shutters off and start shining that forward, because this is your world. This is your game. This is your career. This is your role to optimize inside of your organization. The traction that you get, though, is going to be a function of the way that you're able to influence the people around you, and it's your frame to control, okay? Oh, let me just touch on this. Either way, whether you're below or above, you need to use that to your advantage in some way, okay? If the benchmark is what makes your number mean something to someone who doesn't live in this data day to day. Read that again. The benchmark is what gives them the reference point that makes your number mean something to somebody who doesn't live in this day to day. If at a compliance conference, someone's like, yeah, we're getting 15 reports per 100, we'd all be like, oh, wow, that's amazing. If you said that to my board member, he'd be like, okay, and like, what does that even mean? I don't have any context for that. So much of our job is providing that context. That context is the frame, okay? So take control of that. You're gonna love being a framer, okay? It's so easy. It's so easy and fun to control that frame and take back the control for the conclusions that people are just naturally, that we're crossing our fingers and hoping that they naturally kind of wander to. So I want you to think about this. What separates a strategic advisor from a reporter of status? Okay, there's an operational characteristic and there's an infrastructure difference that I want to spend a couple quick seconds talking about here. So the operational characteristics of an advisor versus a just reporter of status. This is a status update. This is how much happened last month, last year. As opposed to somebody who's advising the business, which is what your freaking role is, okay? The programs that consistently influence boards share one structural trait. They don't rebuild their reporting from scratch each quarter, okay? If you're spending more of your time doing decision-making, applying your unique skill set, applying all the things that were on your resume that ended up getting you the job, then that's great. 5 stars, okay? Bunch of thumbs up for you. If you're spending all of your time, though, chasing down papers and chasing down signatures and trying to reconstruct all the data because your data is dirty, you don't have time to do that deep work, that deep thought that allows you to bring actual insights. So then what do? You just end up defaulting to activities, okay? So the time saved from the manual reconstruction is the time spent is taking away time spent on interpretation, on building this advisory framework or this advice that your organization is paying you to bring, okay? So what are some of the structural infrastructure differences? So we're going to talk about metrics configured and refreshed. How quickly are our metrics reconfigured? How quickly and easily can we cut our data? Again, this is a garbage in, garbage out kind of process, right? If our data is dirty and we got to do a bunch of work for it, then we're not going to be able to get those insights, or it's going to be really hard to get those insights. And if you're doing a bunch of freaking cleanup along the way, it means that your approvals are messed up, that you don't have the right controls on your fields within your case management system. And so recreating, how can you monitor something that takes 18 hours to recreate? You can't. So when that's updating in a clean way and the dashboards you're getting are clean because you've done the pre-work to ensure that the garbage, that's not garbage coming in, that allows you to monitor this stuff a lot faster. And again, get to action, okay? Visualizations that update in real time, that's great. How great is it? We had a client recently who was like, oh, it was so awesome. I was in the board meeting and they asked me this question and I was able to just pull it up and make a couple of changes and show them, spin my thing around, spin my laptop around and show them what that updated data is. So when your data is clean and you have those and you have that flexibility in your reporting, it can allow you to be a lot more flexible and a lot more nimble with the data points that should ultimately indicate how you should be acting a little bit different. Again, in the absence of that, what else are you going to do? You're just going to be one foot in front of the other. You're just going to keep kind of chugging along. You're not going to have anything to talk to other than, changes in activities. Okay. Also think about getting your narrative pre-built. This is the most critical thing. Your advisor doesn't come, if you have a life coach, they don't come to there. They don't just like make it up and shoot from the hip. Okay. Even if they have a pre-built narrative that has allowed them to ascend to this position of life coach or whatever. But think about, how can I connect what's going on, the visibility that I have into the data pools that I have access to? How can I better connect those to the objectives of the organization? And how can I have some of my own personal objectives for the context of my career, the context of my department, that I can reinforce in the delivery of my insights? I want everyone to think about me. This is you talking. I want everyone to see me as an advisor to the business. I want them to see me as a business person first. I want them to see me wearing the same jersey that they are wearing every single day, because I'm trying to put the same scores up on the same side of the scoreboard. That takes a little bit of intentionality. So take advantage of the information asymmetry that you have. So here's your week 1 checklist. Okay. So this week, I want you to run a discovery test, search for your own hotline the way a new employee would, search for it on mobile, search for it on the web. Pull an anonymous trend data. Look at your anonymous information against categories, against reporter types, perhaps even by business unit if you're able to, and by issue type. Look at some trends in there. Does something pop? Like, so much of data analysis is just looking at, oh, well, that looks weird. Let me ask some more questions about that. That's all that this is, okay? So newsflash about finance folks, that's all that they do, okay? Identify the 5 most common investigator follow-up type questions and see how you can incorporate that in your ethics portal, in an email, in a PDF that is sent around to everybody to say, hey, we're working on, I got a great article coming up. You guys are going to love this, but share the flaws inside your program. Share the things that you're working on to improve your program. Make your problem the organization's problem, and see how that humanizes you, and see how that knocks down these walls that so many of us have around, the compliance department. Okay. This quarter, I want you to try to add some kind of a way to get departing employee reports into your program, whether that's through a Google form, whether that's utilizing a sample rate on departing employees through a partner like Ethico, whether that's starting to do stay or exit interviews and bringing that in as a different kind of an issue type. Figure out a way to get some of that. Maybe HR is already doing that. How can you get some of that information from them to start incorporating that to this broader picture that you have, that you're forming, this mosaic of data points that are leading your program forward, okay? Review your vendor and contractor intake experience from their perspective. Do a test call. Figure out, on your ethics portal, do you have a special form for vendors and contractors? Do you have FAQs from a vendor and contractor perspective? Are they even on your radar as an ample source for risk intelligence that can improve your business? Think through that. Build a 3-year benchmark narrative. Start to think about, if I could wave a magic wand and I had all the resources available, how would I want my organization to look? Okay, how would I want my department to look? How would I want the performance? How would I want my benchmarking to look? That's going to give you some North Stars that you can start kind of working toward, and that can help influence your narrative and bring a little romance to this thing. Bring a little romance to your board conversations and set a vision for your program, because nobody drifts to the top of the podium at the Olympics. That takes a lot of visualization, and that takes a lot of deep vision, and you have that available to you as well. And evaluate whether your current infrastructure is actually rebuilding or refreshing, and what you might need to do that. Do you need to put some better controls on your approval workflow so that you put eyes on all the investigations to make sure all the right fields are filled out? Do you have gaps in your investigation process that are leading to this garbage in, garbage out problem that is preventing you from getting a good read on what's going on the dashboards that you have in place? Okay. So you have the data, you have the brains, you have the access, you have the heart. You have a lot at your fingertips. The question is what you're going to do with it. So I hope you found this valuable. The replay is going to be coming out. We, of course, are going to send around these resources, the slide deck. We're trying to build these slide decks as more of a referenceable resource for you. So please give us some feedback on what you liked, what you didn't like. I know I ran 23 minutes long. Yowza. So anyways, that's what you got. All right. So next Tuesday, we do not have a session because we're going to be down at HCCA. So, and we're probably going to be recovering from our big party on Monday night. So if you're down in Orlando, definitely want to swing by, at least swing by the booth, get a book, and come and get a drink or some appetizers or whatever we have at the coolest party at HCCA. And then next Thursday, we got another great episode that is escaping me right now. Joe has sent it and everything. So just trust me, it'll be good. Okay. Love you all. See you next week. Take it easy.